Hi! Before we look at how I got on the trails with the Luftkappe air spring in my forks, I thought it'd be good to explain a little bit about what the Luftkappe does and a bit about forks and how they work, especially air forks versus coil forks. The Luftkappe replaces the air spring at the top of the air piston in the fork, and effectively it increases the negative chamber in the fork. So what is a negative chamber and why do we use it and what's it useful for? So when we talk about forks, air forks and the way they work, if this is force and that's travel. So when we talk about travel, we're literally meaning the amount of movement that the lower legs, the bottom bit of the forks, travels up the stanchions, normally the shinier bit of the forks, and that's how much, though that distance is travel. Okay, so with an air fork, what happens is that at the beginning, you don't need much force to get it moving, and you get quite a lot of travel. And then as you get to the middle and the end of the travel, you need a lot of force. And that's because basically what's happening is that the positive chamber has got air in it and you're compressing it and putting it under a lot of pressure. And obviously it can't compress infinitely. So what we use is a thing called a negative chamber, which basically is in the same fork and it balances it out. And so the larger the negative chamber, the easier it is for the fork to start moving. It overcomes what's called stiction. Stiction is basically the resistance, the inherent resistance that gets the fork moving, that you have to overcome to get the fork moving. So that's where having a bigger negative chamber is great, because it gets it moving more easily and it keeps it moving and it assists you right the way through. So there are other varieties of things that you can do to your fork. So obviously you can change all the controls that are standard with it. Fox's Evol 2 piston is designed to increase the negative chamber a certain amount, and I believe there are other products from companies like Push, but I chose to use the Luftkappe. A friend of mine's used it, he recommended it, and I wanted to see what it was like. So I fitted the Luftkappe last week, and I headed out to my local trails to try them out. I like trying out suspension and making changes and so on my local trails, partly because I know them like the back of my hand, so I know how I expect the trails to feel in all different weather conditions, but also because our local trails have got loads and loads of little routes. So they're perfect for testing the small bump compliance. So again, for testing out that early to mid range of the travel where I'm expecting to find that actually the travel moves more easily, there's less resistance because of that negative chamber. So Luftkappe, it can help people, you can run a higher pressure with it in the fork, and that can help people who bottom out a lot. That's not such a problem for me because of the style of my riding, but I really notice sort of small bump compliance essentially. We'll have a look at the videos, but what I want to say first about the Luftkappe, I was really impressed. I didn't know what I'd expected small bump compliance, it says that, but what I didn't think about but what I most appreciated was quite how planted my feet felt. I'm not a huge jumper, I'm not terribly or not always very confident at it, especially not on bigger jumps. And I think part of that is because sometimes my feet fly off even when I'm pressing right down. So for me, finding that actually I was no longer being bucked around so much was a huge, huge bonus. The bike felt really, really planted. So what I've got for you now is 3 videos, 3 different bikes, 3 different riders. It's not scientific because the bikes are all different. The riders are all different, with different weights, sexes and so on. But what is consistent is that they are all Fox 36 forks that have had a modification done to them. Well, actually the first one hasn't. But they are all Fox 36 forks. So it does give you a rough idea. So in this first video, we've got Tara riding a Santa Cruz 5010. And if you have a look at the video, watch her travel and watch how much of it is being used and how slowly it returns, So what the consequence is that she's bounced around quite a lot more and her front wheel bumps off quite a lot. So in this next clip we've got Tom riding a Santa Cruz Mega Tower, and his fork has been replaced, the insides have been replaced with the Luftkappe, the Vorsprung, who make Luftkappe, with their coil spring. So a coil spring is actually, it's quite interesting. So this is the travel on the air spring. If you have a coil spring, we describe it as linear. So basically, force and travel have exactly the same reaction at all points. So that's great. The downside is that the coil has to be tailored to your weight, and so you have to make sure you've bought the correct one and so on. It's also a bit heavier, so for example, me as a rider, I prefer a really light bike. And so for me it'd be slightly counterintuitive to put on a heavy spring. Not ruling it out, but it's not something I'd go out and buy immediately. But if you have a look at Tom's video, you can see how really consistent that travel is. The reason I'm showing you this video is because some people say that by increasing the negative chamber on the Luftkappe, you are actually making it behave more like a coil fork. So have a look at Tom's video. This is my video, and have a look at the way my bike is. I'm really planted. The travel, I do sort of run into the middle of the travel, but it responds really nicely, especially if you go back and have a look and compare it to Tara's regular Fox 36. So I'll leave you with a summary that I recorded at the time on the trails, and you'll get a feeling for what I thought of it. But it's in my book, it's worth trying. So, first run out with the Luftkappe, and bloody hell, it's amazing. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to follow more of my videos, subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you'd like to learn more about my teaching or working with me, head over to www.vickybikes.co.uk.